I feel like the hashtag that Telltale was spreading throughout Twitter could be used like for a country song. My Clementine, Johnny Cash would be proud. Hello everyone, Davey here. And before I get started, if you guys hear a rumbling in the background, a slight rumble, it's because the air conditioning is on. And usually I turn it off so that you don't hear it. But it is so hot here in the high desert that, you know what, I don't care. I'm sweating down my back right now. I don't care. I'm going to leave it on because I really need it, or else I'm going to pass out. But the time has come. The finale for Season 2 of Telltale's The Walking Dead video game has been released. I have played it, and I am here to talk about it. Now, as usual, I'm going to talk about the episode without any spoilers. I'm just going to break down the story as vague as possible, talk about the gameplay as well as the presentation for the episode, give my rating, and then I'll move on to spoilers towards the end of this video. And in episode 5, Clementine and the group keep pushing forward after the tumultuous cliffhanger that we were left with at the end of the previous episode. And to be honest, there's no progression in the story for this episode, except for our characters literally going from point A to point B because of a particular motivation. Something gets introduced, a certain element that we haven't seen in the... Well, I mean, we've seen in Walking Dead lore before, but we haven't seen it with these characters in this adaptation of the Walking Dead world. And so after introducing this element, questionable things are brought up amongst these characters, and it's mostly a character-driven episode that leads up to a climax that we kind of saw coming, but because we are now witnessing in front of, at least I was witnessing it happening, it was very intense. And that's probably the game's strongest asset, is that despite not progressing an awful lot in terms of the plot, it's all about the characters in this episode. There are so many great moments that are very character-driven throughout this episode, whether it be something lighthearted to kind of give our characters some time to breathe from the situation and just be like regular people, not having to worry about surviving. In fact, one character literally says that you're so busy trying to stay alive that you forget what it is to be living. And that was just a really perfect quote to describe these moments that these characters have throughout this episode. And you also got moments between Clementine and other characters, and there's some that I can't talk about without spoiling it, because despite being at the 5th episode of the season, there are some people out there who are not playing the season as each episode gets released. They're waiting until all of the episodes get released on the physical media, on the disc. And I feel bad for those people, because those people need to be very careful to be on Facebook or Twitter. In fact, I remember going on Twitter and somebody said, oh, somebody spoiled something that I didn't know about for Season 2. And let's just say that some of these spoilers are even in the promotional material for Season 2, at least for the past couple of episodes of Season 2 from Telltale themselves. So, without mentioning certain characters and certain things, I will say that this episode has these great moments of you as Clementine connecting with all these different characters and having some really tender, genuine moments that you haven't seen in quite a while, and because of that, you grow to attach yourself to these characters. And despite having been with these characters for some time throughout the season, it's here in this episode, in the finale, where you feel a genuine sense of warmth and companionship, and characters looking at each other like, hey, we've made it this far. And they're not, it's almost like they're self-referential that it's a finale for the season, so they're kind of looking at each other like, hey, we're bros, alright, we got this. And one of the characters that shines a whole lot in this episode would be Clementine herself. Up until this point, I felt like Clementine was more of a vessel for me as the player to make these choices and to really quote-unquote customize my Clementine into being this kind of person. But it was in this episode where I felt like I wasn't a player controlling Clementine. Clementine has legitimately grown in front of my eyes, where, like I said, in those moments that she has with those characters and certain things that she says, especially by the end of this episode and the ending for this episode, it was where I noticed that Clementine has really grown, not only from the first episode of the season, but also from last season. And there's something that I'll mention a lot more later on, but there's something shown in this episode that gives you a really broader retrospect as to how Clementine has changed and how this world changed her. And of course, that's mainly relying on you and what decisions you made to shape your Clementine, hence the hashtag MyClementine, because you could have made her out to be very cold and aggressive, to where she had to make certain decisions that other characters will look at her and be like, you're not a little girl no more. But you could also make her a compassionate character, and it is in the final moments of this episode, particularly that last moment before we cut to credits, where the developers brought that to the forefront and showed you this is how far your Clementine has come. It was also in this episode where I felt like not only did Telltale handle the character moments very well, but also some of the more tense, suspenseful moments that we've come to know from the Walking Dead world, where I was just at the edge of my seat and my heart was pounding. And what helped in that is, of course, the fact that this is the finale, and I've grown to like so many of these characters that when they're put in a particular predicament, say that 5 times, I was seriously worried that our characters wouldn't make it, and Telltale handled it very well once again. My only slight complaint about the story for this episode would be that even though this episode did clock a little longer than the previous couple of episodes, because if you guys remember, I kept saying that for some strange reason the episodes keep getting shorter as they went along. I think the last one was only like an hour and 45 minutes or so. Even though this one is significantly longer than the previous two, clocking in around 2.5 hours probably, and it's definitely longer than last season's finale, which was about an hour and a half, I will admit that I felt like there were certain moments where they were dragging the story a little too much and getting slightly repetitive. Not with several things in the story, but one particular thing where Clementine is often told by so many characters that she needs to talk to this one other person. You gotta talk to that person. You know, you should talk to that person. You gotta talk to that person. Okay, I get it. Now moving on to the presentation, where I felt like they went ahead and upped their ante for this episode, being that it's a finale. Not only was the art style beautiful once again, very reminiscent of the original comic books, and that very cartoony style, but at the same time self-shaded type of graphics that really complement the series very well. But I felt like the voice cast were better in this episode than throughout all of season 2, because I genuinely felt emotion through their performances. Especially, I can't remember their names, but the woman who plays Clementine and the actor who plays this other character that I cannot mention, even though most of you already know who it is. I'm not gonna beat around the bush for you guys, but there are some people who are, like I said, they're waiting for season 2 to get released later on disc, all 5 episodes, so I'm not going to spoil it for them. Wait until I get to the spoiler section and I'll talk about it. But everybody in the cast were great, but I also felt like the directors handled the episode very well, because it's a very climactic episode, being the last one in the season. There were certain moments where they went ahead, they went through the trouble of actually moving the camera in a very cinematic fashion, to where when something dramatic was happening, the camera would slow down and would tilt, and it would be something out of a very cinematic experience, like a movie or these other more cinematic video games that have been released recently. Nothing really new gets introduced in the finale in terms of gameplay, but I felt like there was more of it than the previous couple of episodes. I was often complaining with episodes 3 and 4 that it was more like a movie where you got to interact in certain places rather than an actual adventure game. Here, there were more moments where I felt like I was part of the action. Not a whole lot, but more to put it in that category of an actual point-and-click adventure game. All of this amounted to a really good finale, but in my opinion, something that I mentioned some time ago in this review is presented to us that I consider to be the very, very sweet cherry on top of this sundae that just made the episode for me. And I'll get to it in my spoiler section for this video, but my god, this moment was amazing. And don't get me wrong, it had me worried a little bit, The way it was presented, I was like, Telltale, don't do this. You're too smart for this. If you do this, I swear to God, I'm going to throw my controller and I'm done with you. I am done with you. But fortunately, they didn't go in that direction, and it was just the most sincere way to do this for the finale. And it was this moment in this episode, like I said, that cherry on top, that made this a rather great finale to a rather good second season for The Walking Dead Telltale game. It may not be the highest point for the season. In fact, I believe that the season's best episode was probably episode 3 when they're at Carver's camp. I felt like that was where season 2 was at its strongest, but this was definitely not a disappointment. It was significantly better than the previous episode, and definitely a very satisfying finale for season 2, and a nice way to open up a new chapter for what is more than likely going to be season 3, because why wouldn't they? So for that, I give episode 5 of season 2 of Telltale's Walking Dead video game a 9 out of 10. I kind of want to say it's a low 9 out of 10, but you know what? That thing that I was talking about really drove it home for me. Okay, so time to talk about some spoilers. So if you have not played episode 5 of The Walking Dead video game season 2, stop watching now, go play it. It's out now. I believe by the time that this video gets released, it's out for all systems, all platforms, and whatever. Go play it and then come back to this point of the video and you can watch the rest of it. If you have, then go ahead and stick around and enjoy. So, let's go ahead and talk about the most spoilery thing about anything Walking Dead, from the TV show to the comics to the video game: deaths. Character deaths. I don't know what's with my lips. Deaths. Okay? And we had 2 big ones in this episode. The first one is Luke. And I gotta be honest, I really liked Luke. So to see him go out in a way that often terrifies me. Okay, it's one thing to get eaten by walkers. I imagine it to be very painful physically. Drowning, on the other hand, is where I've always had this thing with drowning that it looks traumatic. From what I hear, from what I hear, how can I hear from this if they're dead? But so the word going around is that apparently drowning, after you get to that point where, when you get to that point where your lungs are practically full of water and you're no longer gasping for air, it's actually quite peaceful and you just go out quietly and softly instead of like panicking. But I always thought drowning is like a very claustrophobic type of death. Anyways, to see one of my favorite characters throughout the season go out that way and just disappear into the abyss, honestly, it hurt me. I felt like between the 2 significant deaths that happened in season 2, this was the one that made me feel more like, oh man, no, not him. A day after your birthday. I should have known that maybe him celebrating bringing up his birthday and saying, hey, it's my birthday, was kind of like the girlfriend picture of that soldier in war that says, hey, this is my girlfriend, I'm gonna come back to her and ask her to marry me someday. One day away from retirement. It's that sort of equivalent, but at the same time, it didn't feel so obvious that I simply just looked at it and said, hey, he's just celebrating his birthday, not willing to think that he was going to die the next day. The only slight problem with this death is that even though I chose to help him as Clementine, I actually walked across the ice and I fell through. I'm pretty sure that no matter what I had chosen, whether to stay back and cover him or go help him, he was going to die anyway. And I felt that. I felt that by the end, there was no way I was going to be able to help him. The other significant death that I'm actually not sure whether or not it would have happened because of the statistics that show up at the end was Kenny. Kenny finally dying by the end of this season, and this is for sure. You know, it wasn't like in last season where he disappears and you don't know whether or not he's still alive. Here we get the confirmation, at least for me, I get the confirmation that he is now dead. And I chose to kill him. I didn't choose to look away while him and Jane were fighting in the snow, which, like I said, was a pretty great climax to end the season on. But I chose to kill him because up until that point, I felt like I was giving him the benefit of the doubt too many times. Like, there were too many times where I wasn't exactly choosing sides, but I kept saying, guys, both of you, stop arguing, both of you this, both of you that, whenever it involved Kenny and some other character. It was here where not only was I on to, as a player, I was on to Jane's plan that, you know, I was certain that she hid the baby somewhere to show what Kenny was capable of if he was pushed to that, like Jane said, that breaking point. Even though Clementine wasn't, I actually wish that there was an option that said, I know what you're up to, because me as a player, I knew what she was up to. Except all the options said, I don't understand, or what are you doing, or how could you let that happen? So I just chose like to stay quiet because I already knew what was going on. And I thought that was actually a pretty good plan by Jane. Because then we could have seen what type of person Kenny was. And at that point, I felt like Kenny is just a rabid dog at this point. Okay, he's a rabid dog. He's like Old Yeller, got rabies. I have to put him down. As much as I love him, I have to put him down. As much shit as we've gone through, I have to put him down. And that's the choice that I made by the end of the episode, is to put Kenny down. And it's funny because they actually went ahead and made Kenny say, you did the right choice because I lost it. And this is my final destination. Sorry to go with the puns there, but that was where he needed to end up in, and he even recognized it. So I didn't have that much of a problem with Kenny dying, but I felt like it was satisfying. Not in a way where I hated the character or even disliked the character, but it was just something that needed to happen. Alright. Spoilers for Breaking Bad. If you have not seen Breaking Bad, don't listen to this. Like, block it out for like 10, 20 seconds, then get back to it. But I compared it to Walter White having to die by the end of the season, where I didn't want him to die because I hated the character, I loved the character, but he needed to not only complete his redemption, but tie up all loose ends, and it was the only way that it could have ended. You get what I'm saying? And that's what I felt was necessary for Kenny. Now, I said I like Jane's plan, but let's go ahead and talk about Jane, who, hey, she left us at the end of last episode, so it was only fitting for her to return in the finale. And trust me, when she returned, I was like, yes, because I really love this character. I love how well developed she was in the last episode, and I love how they developed her more in this episode. And I decided to stay with her by the end of the episode and go back to the camp, Carver's camp, and now take it as my own. My only little nitpick would be that they did that classic thing where if you love a character so much and they bring him back, and I'm okay with that, they do it in a very convenient way to where a character is in danger, but then boom, look, just in the nick of time, this character returns and kills the bad guy. You know, it's kind of cliche at this point, so I kind of don't like it that they did that in this episode. But because it was Jane, and because I like Jane so much, I looked past it. Now let's talk about a couple of characters that I'm glad they are alive, but I'm very disappointed, almost heartbroken to see that they went ahead and changed in terms of personality, in terms of morals. And of course I'm talking about Mike and Bonnie, who decide to arrange somewhat of a mutiny against Kenny and the group with Orville because they feel like they're just not safe with Kenny, which I completely understand because, like I said, he turned into a rabid dog. But it's a shame that they had to do it in a way where I genuinely felt betrayed as Clementine because they didn't include me in this. They didn't talk about it. The next day, they're literally just there. And all the signs were there. You know, Mike often treating Orville. And then that moment with Bonnie where she's having the cigarette and her attitude was a little colder than usual. I felt like I should have seen the signs, but I didn't really pay attention to them all that much. And it's moments like that where I feel like this game really excels in making you feel like Clementine. Now, will we see Mike and Bonnie once again in Season 3? Should there be one? Which chances are there will be. I believe so, because unlike 400 Days, these characters are tied to Clementine, and by the end of this episode, sorry, Clementine is still alive, along with Jane, at least for me. I don't know if she's alive with Kenny or Jane for you guys, but for me, she's alive with Jane. And so I can definitely see them crossing paths once again, and hopefully we get to figure out what happened with Krista, because we just don't know where she is. I also thought Telltale pulled it off, the slight fake outs of Clementine possibly dying, which I never ruled out. Lee died in the finale, so I was open to the possibility that maybe Clementine might bite the dust by the end of this episode. But I actually kind of enjoyed that Clementine survived by the end of the episode, and chances are we're gonna be able to play as her in season 3, or maybe they'll throw a twist and they'll have you play as the character that she is with by the end of the episode, whether it be Kenny or Jane. That would be really interesting. If I play as Clementine again, that's cool because I really like her. But man, that would be actually quite awesome if you get to play as either Jane or Kenny, whoever ended up with you by the end. And I don't even know. Maybe Kenny dies no matter what. Maybe Jane pulls the upper hand if you look away while you're looking away, and Kenny still dies. I don't know. I haven't looked it up. But despite them pulling off the fake outs of whether or not she was going to die, especially when she got shot by Arvo, man, fuck you, Arvo. He really annoyed me in this episode. And I understand, he's scared, he doesn't understand English very well, but by the time he was in that car, he pulls out that gun, and he often gives you that look. I was like, fuck you, Arvo. But him shooting Clementine, this sounds kind of bad, but him shooting Clementine led, in my opinion, to probably one of the best moment in season 2. The moment that I kept mentioning in my spoiler-free section, this is it. The cameo by Lee Everett in a dream sequence from Clementine. That was, I felt emotional with certain deaths that happened up until this point in season 2. But to see a character return in a dream sequence was the one that got me a little bit misty-eyed. The most beloved character in the Walking Dead Telltale game. I mean, probably people love Clementine, certain people probably love Clementine a little more, but me personally, Lee Everett is the man. And to see him return this way, I was like, this is perfect. This is just perfect. And what I enjoyed more is that it wasn't a retread of a scene from season 1. It takes place in a setting that we have seen in season 1, when they're in their RV and Kenny's driving and Duck just got bit and Katja's holding Duck. Ben is over there in the back, and the whole thing with Carly and Lily just happened, was brought up by Clementine. But the dialogue is different, and I don't know what it was, but for some reason Lee doesn't know what's going on, which to me kind of sort of doesn't make sense, because Ben is with them, and if Ben is with them, then they already went through the whole thing where Ben's teacher, or Ben's band's teacher or professor or whatever, got bit, and then he turns, and then Ben says, oh yeah, you guys don't know, you come back no matter what. If you die, you come back. You have to get put down in the brain. If Ben is with them, then they went through that, so why is Lee saying, I think it's like a cold? No, that to me kind of didn't make sense, but I forgave it because Lee Everett was back. Now I said that I was worried because I was like, please don't tell me that all of season 2 was a dream. Don't do that. Don't do that. Please don't. Or even the finale for season 1. Don't do this. And honestly, I wasn't fully scared. There were moments where I'm like, Telltale's too smart for this. But I had my suspicions where I'm like, oh, what if they do it? What if they do it? There's certain TV shows that did that, and we didn't think that they were going to do it, but they did it. My God. But fortunately, we fade out to black, and we cut back to Kenny and Jane in the car, and you wake up from your gunshot wound. And I'm like, thank God, that was just a dream sequence, and probably one of the best ways to bring back a dead but very beloved character in a non-artificial way, in a way that felt genuine and sincere. I mean, when he called her Sweet Pea during that scene, bringing back memories from season 1. And now on to my final subject for the spoiler section of this video, would be those last moments when Clementine and Jane are at the camp back once again, looking for baby formula, whatever, and they come across these strangers. It's a man, a white man, I don't know what she looked Asian, maybe? An Asian woman and a black little kid. And they make it, they introduce themselves and say, hey, we're looking for food, we don't know where else to go, can you take us in? We'll help out, whatever. The introduction that we've heard before. And it is in this moment where, like I said, they showcased the type of person that Clementine has become, at least your Clementine has become. Are you going to go ahead and let these people in, or are you going to turn them away? Me personally, after the experiences that I've shared as both Lee and Clementine throughout the game, and the most recent case with Arvel, I turned them away. And the guy was showing a little bit of hostility, and then he turns around and he's got that gun behind him. And it was there where I felt like Clementine's arc hasn't exactly been completed, but has progressed in a way that feels like I don't know. This felt great, and not because it's a great thing that Clementine did this, but because it showed how much of a character study the game has been up until this point for Clementine. And you know, it makes you think, what direction is Clementine gonna take in season 3? Should you play as her, or even if you play as Jane or Kenny, what type of character will this little girl become? Especially at the age that she is, you're like, what is it gonna take to live in this world as this little girl? And for me, I felt like this development in Clementine's arc reflects the title for this episode: No Going Back. There's no going back to being that little innocent girl that we saw in season 1. Clementine is now a different person. And so, yeah, I decided to turn the adults away. And that last shot of the little kid looking back, fading out, it makes me wonder, are these characters going to be very viable characters in season 3? Are they going to return? Or are they going to bring back people that they were lying about and retaliate against the camp? Who knows? But I definitely think it's a very interesting and somber way to end the season. And so with that, I conclude my spoiler section for this video, as well as my review for the final episode of season 2. And if this past season is anything to go by, should there be a season 3, we probably won't see it until maybe December of this year. If not, then probably early next year. So until then, thank you guys for watching. If you guys liked this review, like it, comment, whatever, and let me know what you guys thought of episode 5. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.